Now, breaking news this hour, a stark warning from President Trump to Russia, get ready. In an early morning tweet, Mr. Trump said this: get ready, Russia, because they will be coming nice and new and smart. You shouldn't be partners with a gas-killing animal who kills his people and enjoys it. This warning on Twitter, it comes after Moscow threatened swift retaliation against any potential U.S. airstrikes in Syria on Monday. The president promised some sort of decision within 48 hours following an apparent chemical attack near Damascus. Activists say dozens of civilians were killed. We are covering this story from all angles. CNN's Nick Robertson joins me now live from Moscow. Ben Wiedemann is live for us in Beirut. Thank you both for joining us. Nick, first to you. After Russia urged the U.S. to avoid taking military action, now we have this taunt on Twitter, Trump again saying, get ready, Russia, they will be coming. Nick, does this bring us closer to military action in Syria?
It seems to indicate that President Trump intends for that to happen, despite the fact that he came to office saying that he wouldn't telegraph his military moves in advance, and even hinted at that just a couple of days ago, saying that he wasn't going to say in advance what he was going to do. But this seems to very clearly do that. Maria Zakharova, the foreign ministry spokeswoman here, has taken to her Facebook page just minutes ago, following President Trump's tweets, to respond to President Trump talking about smart missiles flying. Russia had better be ready. She said those smart missiles should be fired at the terrorists, not the legitimate government of Syria, and then goes on to suggest in the same Facebook posting that perhaps what the United States is intending to do here is to obliterate evidence on the ground of what Russia says is a chemical weapons fabrication. She says that she's implying that the U.S. missile strikes would hit the area of Douma, where international chemical weapons inspectors are due to go in coming days, and the intent of the U.S. missile strike she's implying is to destroy any evidence there. We've also, however, heard from Dmitry Peskov, President Putin's spokesman. He has been taking a slightly, perhaps drawn back, quieter approach to this. It was before President Trump's tweets. However, he said he didn't want to get drawn into a conversation about what might happen if U.S. missiles were to fly towards Syria. He didn't want to follow up or amplify on what the Russian ambassador to Lebanon had said. But he did also talk about the need to sort of slow things down and try to calm the current situation.
And calm is needed right now. Nick Robertson in Moscow. Let's go from you to Ben Wiedemann standing by in Beirut. And Ben, if there is a U.S. military strike on Syria, what would that mean for an already volatile situation on the ground there?
But it would clearly, Christy, make things probably a lot worse, because the United States really doesn't have a lot of good options when it comes to Syria. It can do what it did a year ago after the Khan Sheikhoun alleged chemical attacks, which is a one-off strike, which really didn't change much. The air base that they hit in central Syria was up in operation just days later, or they can go for a much wider military operation with the assistance of perhaps the French and the British, but it runs a high risk of bringing other players into the fight. It's not just the Syrians, obviously. There are significant Russian forces in Syria. There are Iranian forces. There are Lebanese Hezbollah there, in addition to ISIS, the Turks, the Israelis flying over the southern part of the country. And therefore, the possibilities are endless and dangerous. And certainly when you look at the tone of President Trump's tweet about the missiles coming, I mean, in my 25 years with CNN covering American wars and rumors of war, I've never seen anything like this. And this is sending the sort of message that clearly is alerting all those forces in Syria that might be the targets of an American operation, that something's coming, be ready, and therefore it's questionable, even if it's a large-scale operation, how successful it could even be. The whole thing is a complete mess.
As you mentioned, I mean, these taunts on Twitter are unprecedented. It begs the question, just how real are these threats? Let's bring up Fred Pleiken, who is live for us from Damascus. And Fred, we have rising rhetoric from Trump with this new taunt on Twitter, rhetoric from the Russians inside Syria. Is there a sense that, yes, the pressure is building, there will be a military strike?
Well, I think it's slowly sinking in with the government and also with the Syrian population, quite frankly, Christy, that this is a very real situation and that the prospect of American military action is not only very real, but could happen very, very soon. Some of the things that we've been seeing over the past, let's say, day and a half or so is we have seen more Syrian military convoys moving around than usual. It's unclear whether or not that's something that's actually related to the current situation, but we certainly can see that the Syrian government is taking this very seriously. And of course, the Russians are taking it very seriously as well. And if you look at the statement that came from the Russian embassy there in Lebanon, they not only say that they would shoot down any missiles fired at Syria, but they would also target the bases that those missiles were fired from. Now, of course, that could mean American ships if those were fired from the Mediterranean, but of course it could also mean American planes as well. That's not really very clear. And you know, Christy, I've been in this country 20 times reporting here, and I've also seen it from the Russian military perspective and what they have on the ground here. And it's a lot more than many people think. They obviously have their military base up near Latakia, where I would say they have about 50 planes, maybe a little more than that. They also have their port in Tartus, but we were out in the eastern Mediterranean just at the end of last year, and all of a sudden 2 Russian submarines came up and started firing cruise missiles at ISIS positions. So the Russians not only have a lot of hardware here in Syria, but they also have their most modern hardware as well, Christy.
And with that reminder of the Russian arsenal inside Syria, let's take the conversation back to Nick Robertson in Moscow. And it's a question to you about if there's a diplomatic way out. I mean, are there any diplomatic moves left when we've seen at the UN Security Council, Russia continues to exercise its veto?
There was an offer several weeks ago by the Austrian foreign minister, a new foreign minister in Austria, to mediate between Britain and Russia over the issue of the escalating tensions over the case of the Skripals. Nothing seems to have been forthcoming so far. The rhetoric and the tone that has been used at the United Nations by both the Russian and American side has sounded very, very bitter. And the conversations, if you can call them that, divisive. That said, the Russian ambassador to the UN and the US ambassador Nikki Haley actually met each other outside the Security Council chamber, kissed each other on both cheeks. So there was some less than hostility in that greeting, some diplomacy left in it, if you will. There is always room for diplomacy at times like this. However, the difficulty would appear to be at this time that President Trump has a record of generally following through on what he says, and he's made it very, very clear this time about what he intends to do. However, he's also capable of turning on a dime, so it's not impossible that diplomacy could come through, but it's not quite clear where that would be at the moment. And I think the very quick response we've had from the foreign ministry here is a very strong and clear response that Russia won't take this situation sitting down, if you will. Let's not forget that those air defenses that are there in Syria are mostly Russian air defenses operated by Russians. And if you were having a large military strike on Syria, typically the military, US military, those allied with it, would want to take out any radar installations, any surface-to-air missile installations that might stop missiles or even aircraft getting through to their target. So that immediately opens you up to the dangers of crossing the red line that Russia is threatening here. Perhaps if we look at what Dmitry Peskov has said, albeit before President Trump's tweets, speaking there for the Kremlin, for President Putin, he's tried to keep a lower tone on this, but that is often the way things are done here. President Putin tries to keep a lower tone. Everyone else is putting out the very, very clear and strong message. The message that we heard, however, coming from the Russian ambassador in Lebanon is an amplification and a reflection of what the military chief of staff here said on the 13th of March, almost a month ago, when he first said that Russians thought that the United States was trying to instigate some kind of fake hoax chemical attack in Damascus. Back then, he warned that Russia would attack the missiles and the carriers sending those missiles. So this narrative has been there for some while, so it's not impossible to interrupt it. It's difficult to see how.
Nick Robertson, live for us from Moscow, as well as Ben Wiedemann in Beirut, Fred Pleiken, live from Damascus. We thank all of you for your reporting.